这个馒头比我的脸更光滑。
Mantou is a traditional steamed bread of northern China. For us who live in the tropical region, steamed buns are not a staple food. To us, it is a type of small dish from Cantonese restaurants. Ever since the pandemic, every time we think of going to a restaurant, there's always a great hesitation. So, we decided to make our very own Chinese steamed buns. Mantou looks very simple, but it's not that easy to get right. Fortunately, on the internet, there are a large number of research papers about mantou. Relying on science to solve problems is better than superstition. Okay, now let's make mantou. First, let's define success. The skin of the mantou must be smooth, shiny, white, and delicate. Springy, not gummy, fluffy and soft with a chewy texture. It must have a uniform and fine crumb structure. And use only 3 ingredients: no milk, no sugar, just flour, yeast, and water. The color of the mantou depends on the flour's original color. The finer the flour grain size, the smaller and fewer the bran specks, and the whiter and brighter the flour is. Ash content is an indicator of bran contamination. Flour with ash contents less than or equal to 0.50% best meet the characteristics and requirements of mantou. We use a flour with an ash content of less than 0.47%, protein 10.5 to 11.5%, and we're using 200 grams of it. 2 grams of instant yeast. The weather here is hot and humid, so we use ice water. Calculate the required water temperature. So the required water temperature is equal to 3 times the desired dough temperature, minus the flour temperature, minus the room temperature, minus the friction temperature. Ice water, 105 to 110 grams. Mix all the ingredients evenly. You can hand knead this dough or use a mixer to speed up kneading. Medium speed 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, hand knead until smooth, 3 minutes. When done kneading, there's no need for bulk fermentation. Place the dough onto a work surface, shape the dough into a rod, and divide it into 6 equal pieces. Pull to the middle to raise the surface tension of the dough. Flip. Roll the dough to smooth it out and degas. Flip, and then pull to the middle to shape it. Pinch the seams to seal the dough. Make it into a smooth, round dough ball. Repeat the process for the rest of the dough. Cover it with a cloth. Let it ferment until it has doubled in size. It takes about a half an hour with a temperature of 29 degrees Celsius. Prepare the pot 10 minutes before the dough fermentation is over. Start on high heat. After the water in the steamer boils, turn the heat down to medium for steaming. Then place the bamboo steamer above it. Steam for 10 minutes. Once it's done, wait for 5 minutes before opening. And we are done. Okay, now that we have the recipe down, let's get into some tips and troubleshooting. So, troubleshooting question number 1. Why aren't my mantou smooth, shiny, and white in color? Traditionally, people prefer brighter mantous. So there are 2 factors affecting the appearance and colors of these mantous. The first is the ingredients, the basic ingredients, and the second is the way you make it. The base ingredients you use, as long as your water is colorless, the main one we have to focus on is flour. So if you use regular all-purpose or bread flour, you're likely to get a yellowish shade in your steamed bread. It's not going to give you that snow white perfection. This is mainly due to the amount of processing these flours have been through. The less processing a flour has been through, the higher its ash content. So ash content is a measure of how much ash is left after you burn the flour. The higher the ash content, the more non-endosperm stuff is in there, like specks of bran. These bran specks are part of what makes the flour non-white. So we prefer to use a special pal flour that is more refined. Due to its extra processing, it is much finer and has a lot less bran specks. It's got a lower ash content. Thus, the steam buns it makes are much whiter in shade. Its protein content is also just right for making mantou, so that's why we use it. However, of course, flour alone cannot guarantee us a smooth white mantou. We also have to look at the method of making. Overkneading or overmixing can cause the gluten structure to collapse. This affects the appearance of the mantou and, in the worst case, can even cause shrinkage, so it's important to avoid that. We also have to pay attention to the proofing time. Underproofing creates a dense crumb with few, if any, air pockets. This creates a dull outer appearance. Overproofing creates an uneven crumb that may cause shrinkage. This will definitely not create a smooth outer appearance. There may be all sorts of marks on the outside. Degassing the dough is another important factor. If we don't get rid of the air pockets trapped inside the dough during mixing, then while steaming, these air pockets will actually rise to the surface, forming bubbles on the skin, as they're trapped under this gelatinized skin until you open the lid and they pop, creating blisters on the surface. A yellow shade to the mantou can be caused by the dough having a too high pH. So there are yellow pigments in flour called xanthophylls, and they show up at a certain relatively high pH. So if you use things like baking powder or baking soda that can cause the dough to reach this pH, then you run the risk of having the pH going too high and these pigments pop up and turn everything yellow. For the same reason, if you don't mix your dough properly and you're using baking soda or baking powder, the parts where these clump up will cause yellow spots. Excessively hard water can also adversely affect the dough's whiteness. Of course, these things don't really affect our recipe because we don't use any of them, but it's still good to know. Steam pressure is our next influence on appearance. Too high of a pressure can cause blisters to appear on the surface. Too low of a pressure may not necessarily affect the appearance, but it will definitely create a lower quality mantou. We control steam pressure by controlling the heat on the stovetop and the steamer we use. So when we turn the heat down from high to medium, that's already lowering the steam pressure. Now for the steamer we use. The best option, of course, is the traditional bamboo steamer. This steamer allows the steam to pass through, so it doesn't build up inside, the pressure doesn't build up, and it also doesn't condense on the lid and drip back down. If you're using a metal steamer, then we have to take more into account. We need to take into account the steam pressure and the condensation. To prevent the pressure from building up, it's a good idea to lower the heat a bit and leave a crack open in the lid. Along with that, to prevent the steam's condensation from turning into water droplets that drip back down onto the manto and wreak havoc on their appearance, we need to cover the lid in cloth or a kitchen towel. This will absorb the condensation. Now, finally, aside from the methods and basic ingredients, many use additional ingredients to further whiten or smoothen the manto, ranging from white food coloring to all sorts of whitening agents. We don't use any in this recipe, and I don't really recommend them because they simply aren't needed. People also add emulsifier, fat, and sugar, although this is really more common in southern style manto. This is a northern style one. But anyways, the idea behind this is that the emulsifier combines with the fat and the other ingredients in the dough to create an even distribution of fat particles, and this gives the manto more of a shine, so it enhances the white appearance. However, our recipe is meant to be a very simple and plain version of the northern style manto. These ingredients alter the taste of the manto, and we also felt like we didn't need them, so that's why we didn't include them. So that's our full explanation for the first troubleshooting question. On to the next one, on to question number 2. Why have my manto become ghost-pinched? Looking it up online, apparently in the old days, when people opened up their steamers and found these horribly deformed mantos, they blamed it all on ghosts. So there was a ghost waiting in the steamer, just pinching manto. So, no surprise. It turns out there are a couple of non-paranormal explanations to this. First, kneading. The appearance of the manto dough before it's been steamed will have a giant effect on its appearance after it's been steamed. So we have to knead the dough until it's smooth, shiny, and non-sticky. Of course, this means that all ingredients must be well incorporated. No dry flour left, naturally. However, over-kneading will also cause the dough severe problems. So if we knead it too much and make the gluten structure too strong, this can actually cause shrinking after the steam buns are done. So what happens here is that we kneaded it until it was really strong, we put it in the steamer, and then when it came out of the steamer, it actually relaxed and that just collapsed. Causes catastrophic shrinking. Over-kneading is not the only cause of an overly strong gluten structure. So if you use a very high protein or a very strong flour, then it already has a lot of gluten right off the bat, and it can cause an overly strong gluten network. There's also hard water. So excessively hard water tightens the gluten structure, and this can end up strengthening it further, so that's something to watch out for. Second, proofing. So proofing for too long or for too little can cause this ghost-pinched problem. Proofing is highly dependent on your room temperature and humidity, so you need to adjust that to your own circumstances. Third, degassing. Degassing is to get rid of air bubbles that were trapped during mixing so that they don't appear as blisters during steaming later. Fourth, steaming. So this is actually 3 factors in one. Steaming pressure is one factor. As we've seen already, too high of a pressure can cause blisters. Steaming condensation is another factor. So if we allow those water droplets to just drip back down onto the manto, they're going to cause glaring issues, as is obviously the case. So for these first 2 factors, actually using a bamboo steamer will allow you to dodge most of them. However, for the third factor, this is something that affects both metal and bamboo steamers. If you open the lid of the steamer too quickly, the manto can collapse due to a sudden change in temperature. So what happens is the suddenly cooled manto loses internal pressure and gets squished by external pressure instead. This forces the gases out, and it causes the manto to shrink and results in its terrible appearance. So those were the reasons for ghost pinch buns. Non-ghost related. Continuing to troubleshooting question number 3. So, why are my manto gummy and not fluffy? Gummy manto refers to the kind that sticks to your teeth and doesn't bounce back. So, if your flour has storage problems, if it's been too damp, then it can cause gummy manto. Letting the dough ferment for too long can cause gummy manto. And this isn't just if you leave it outside for too long. If you start the mantos inside a steamer with cold water, then as the water heats up, this will actually create a warmer environment than if you left the manto outside, so the yeast will go into overdrive and overferment it very quickly. A too low steaming rate is another reason for gummy manto. Don't ever let the fire get too low. It needs to have enough power to push up the mantou, or not you're going to get weak and gummy mantou. Not steaming for long enough will create the same effect. Okay, so that's it for gummy mantou. Thanks for watching. I hope you find this information useful and best of luck with your mantou. If you have any more questions, be sure to comment down below. Love reading the comments and we can find a solution together. Thanks for watching. Bye!